www.ether.sk.
Rád by som vás privítal na rozhovaní tejto sekcie zameranej na digitálne médiá. Som rád, že sme sa zišli aspoň v takomto počte, predpokladám, že ešte nejakí uchádzači alebo záujemcovia o túto problematiku nás tam pripoja v priebehu týchto prezentácií. Nebudem hovoriť nejaký dlhý úvod, lebo mám málo času a pomerne veľa príspevkov. Takže by sme začali hneď tými prezentáciami a v prípade mohli by sme to spraviť tak, aby sme sa skrátili, čiže nebude diskusia po každom príspevku, ale zhruba po nejakých 3-4 príspevkoch, že by sme spravili takú diskusiu. I would like to welcome you at our conference and you can open our session with your presentation.
Okay. Hello, thank you very much for having me here. I think I might have prepared too much material. I think there's a time limit, isn't there? Is there?
Approximately 10 minutes.
Okay, well, I will race through, so I'm sorry if it doesn't make sense, because I should be chopping as I go along. So I'm sorry about that. So I'm an artist, and I make self-portraits. And I'm interested in the gap between the picture and myself. And my practice is a kind of series of tryouts. It's what Montaigne called essays. He was trying to find out about himself by writing about himself in the past. So this is what I do. I make various different self-portraits in an attempt to understand. So I've just started to describe this as the psychic hyphen, the bit between the self and the portrait, the little gap in between. So this talk is not about the psychotherapeutic description of projection, which is described as a process that involves the attribution of unacceptable thoughts, feelings and traits or behaviours to others that are characteristic in oneself. So this is an interpersonal phenomenon which occurs between two people. But this is not what happens between me and a picture. When I look at an image of myself, my consciousness bounces back and forth between how I remember the picture being made and how I appear in the picture. So the subject meets the object, returns to the subject and revisits the object. In that repetition, feelings and imagination run riot. I recognise this in Barth's description of the punctum. It has a physical kind of emotional feel to me. So this is closer to the cinematic description of projection described by Slavoj Zizek, and it is concerned with fantasy and desire. So in this little clip, this is an example of what I'm referring to. So play this. Is that working?
Seems not to be working. Seems to be bouncing back.
Does it?
Do you have this one back?
Sorry?
Do you have it on the antenna, this one?
No, I don't. No, it doesn't matter. We leave it. That's fine. I can go to the end because I'm trying to be quick. So a little bit of background about me. I worked as a picture editor on the Times newspaper for about 10 years. So these are a couple of the front pages that I worked on while I was there. So on the left is when Neil Armstrong died, and you know everyone wanted a picture of Neil Armstrong on the moon, but he of course was a photographer, so he took the pictures. So we had to be inventive about how we did it. And on the right is a picture by a very famous war photojournalist called Don McCullen, who some of you may know, but he was in the Vietnam War. He's very well known in war photography. And 2 years ago, aged 78, he went back into Syria and did a piece for us, so that's that one on the right. Earlier in my career, I worked in the rural media in the UK. And this is a piece I shot earlier this year for one of those publications. So in 2000, I started working for an NGO who were providing cardiac healthcare for children in Mozambique and Egypt. And I was really surprised at how emotionally affected I was with these poor children who were, you know, they were at death's door, they were going to die. And so I decided that I would go back to education and do an MA. And I thought that it was going to be a kind of updated version of memorial photography. But no, it wasn't that at all. It was all about me and myself. So it drove me back into the sort of psychological part of my life. And these are the pictures that I made at that time. And these are the pictures of the departure from my art practice. So I have a commercial practice, which was as a picture editor and a photographer working in journalism, and then these pictures that are about me and the psychological link between me and the image. I'm going quickly. And then all these images are on display now at the theatre in Travana. So if you want to see this work, it is all there in all its glory. So my university, I'll race through this, is in the far west of the country, the spot right at the bottom, and there's been education in this area for a very long time, since the 13th century. This is how the university is made up. My PhD project comes under the Institute of Photography and the Academy of Innovation and Research, which is all the postgraduate work, and I also teach in the Fashion and Textiles Institute. This is work by my Director of Studies, Dr. Sian Bonnell. She's a well-known feminist artist. This is one of her Manners series, which has just been on display at the V&A in London. And Falmouth, I'll skip over this. These are the research areas within Falmouth for PhD. So because we're short of time, I'm sorry, I'm going to skip over that. Okay, so how would my practice relate to the digital identity? So 2 weeks ago in the UK, a very well-known newspaper columnist called Alison Pearson wrote an article about the practice of selfie making, which is quite close to what I do. The 50-year-old mother didn't like the selfie at all and talked about it being very narcissistic. But the piece was contextualised by some writing made by her daughter, who makes a lot of selfies, and she disagreed and felt that actually making of a selfie was a very empowering thing for girls. So we had a kind of, cross-generational thing, the 50-year-old thinking, oh, it's rubbish, and the child thinking it was good. And it's very easy to read selfie making as, or my practice, self-portraiture, as narcissistic. So if you look at Kim Kardashian's work, it does look very as though she's obsessed with herself. But I think there's a problem with how the word narcissism has come into meaning, because actually Narcissus didn't know he was looking at himself. He was captivated by this beautiful boy, but he didn't know that it was him. He gradually realised it was himself. But the actual moment of captivation, it was in a state of ignorance. So I believe that the thought of selfie making and self-portraiture as being something narcissistic is actually a sort of outdated. It doesn't really stand up. So I'll jump on here. So in my practice, I am the photographer, I am the subject, and I am the audience. And these positions are referred to by Barth as the operator, the spectrum, and the spectator. In the position of the spectator, I also become the object. And this is a form of dance in which my research resides, by continually adjusting and repeating my position in relation to the photograph. At this point in my research, I mainly spend as the spectator, as my focus is on reading the image, and I have not yet addressed the other positions. There's a researcher in Canada called Katie Warfield, and she's done much research into selfies, working with girls in her university. And she layers theories through the camera, the stage, and the mirror. And it's very theoretically thorough. She rejects a purely photographic reading of the selfie and advocates an approach that recognises what she refers to as digital subjectivities. She uses that phrase, the plural, very deliberately. And she questions whether her subjects are ascribing to an objectified subject in the Cartesian tradition. And this concurs with the daughter of the newspaper columnist, where it is an empowering thing. Warfield describes the golden moment of the selfie, where they reach a sense of authenticity, and the image becomes the real me. So in my practice, I've been particularly thinking about self as a reflection and in relation to the mirror. In the Lacan model, the baby's sense of self is fragmentary until she sees herself in the mirror. Prior to that encounter, she sees parts of her mother, so the eyes and the smile, these little fragments, until she sees herself in the mirror, and then it's there am I. And Lacan understood this in three elements as well: the ego, the ideal ego, and the ego ideal. I'm going to skip over and go to the end, to the ideal ego. It has an element of external perspective. The young child's sense of self is formed in collaboration with the look. Have you ever played peekaboo with a child, you know, when you do that? And the child kind of has a sense of realisation when there is the two eyes are looking at each other. So the idea of play and the circumstances of play are important components for me in my practice as well. And this was studied and disseminated through British child psychologist Donald Winnicott. And he describes the transitional object, and this is the mother's breast or the child's toy. And it is the bridge between the self and the outside. So it is the point where the child is beginning to understand that they're a separate entity. And this is the fantasy space from which play comes, and in later development is translated into creativity. In this context, it could be argued that the sight of the selfie or self-portrait is a potential space, and the image itself, the selfie, is the latter-day transitional object, the bridge between the two. There is an irony that as my picture, my self-portraits have ended up hiding myself as well. I think this could be a generational thing, because I'm more of the mother than the child, so it's not part of my habit. Well, it is, because I make paper portraits now, but it wasn't. So this is one of my mother series. It's based on a Van Dyck painting, and the face is totally photographic. I had thought that this series was about describing the part of myself concerned with the Catholic imperative to be a perfect mother, but now I think it is more complicated, and I'm projecting myself into the image, literally, and the fantasy of the good mother is projecting itself into my psyche. There is another interesting parallel with motherhood and understanding of self, the device for indoctrination of good morals. And the researcher Nina Stromanger has says that actually the essence of self is a moral thing. So, and this is another example as me as a male artist as Van Gogh. And I become less distinct, I really disappear in that picture. And I tend to make an animated version of this picture to see whether it becomes even more strange. So, to finish off, it is my conviction that we see or don't see ourselves in the images that surround us. Even through a reflection or an image, due to its distance, will always be a dissipation of self. The image in the picture and the reflection is always less than the eye. However, imagery is now so stitched into perception, and particularly with Generation Y, with the behaviour of image making around selfies particularly, that pictures do bleed into the conception of self. There is a problem with this in that perceptions depend for their identity upon the identity of the selves that possess them, but this does give me permission to rely on my perception and experience. I believe there is an emotional fit sorry, or dissonance in everything. I believe there is an emotional fit or a dissonance in everything that we see, actually whether an image or not. So the next image was made by somebody I know who's a very well-known portrait photographer in the UK. He's had exhibitions at the National Portrait Gallery, and I know him from working on the Sunday Times magazine. He posted this next image on his Instagram, and the caption reads, "Nobody parked in this space," because they didn't want to be that. So there we go. Was that fast enough?
Thank you for your presentation, and we will continue with next three
Yes.
contribution, and after that
Okay,
we will
I have to be back in
discussion.
Trivana for the exhibition opening, so
Okay. Dobre, teraz poprosím ďalší
To
príspevok.
sa môžem poznamenať, keďže pani Orcutt odchádza, možno by bolo nie od veci robiť teraz diskusiu.
Aha, dobre, nech sa páči, môžeme.
We might go have discussion right now.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah.
Some 5 more minutes, yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry if that was too long.
Okay.
Nech sa páči, máte nejaké otázky? No, možno nie je problém, takže aj slovenčine. Nech sa páči.
Everything is for you.
Even with the rush.
Treba pre nejakú krátku informáciu, pretože
Yes.
your picture of Van Gogh,
Yes.
it's a picture, self-picture, when Van Gogh cut
No, it's early. It's earlier than that. It's from 1887, and he was still in Paris. And he was at that time he was trying to be an art dealer because he thought he was never going to make any money at his work. And I chose that one because it's actually the most kind of realistic. I could actually get my face to fit that. So it was, yeah, I think so. Well, no is the answer.
A pretože teda sa vrátim k tomu, zvyšne vás, neviem, či ste všetci stihli zaregistrovať, keďže ste prišli niektorí trošku neskôr. Zvyšne nás samozrejme pozýva aj premiér na svoju výstavu, ktorá sa bude realizovať v divadle Palárika. Začína vlastne dnes 16:30. It's 4:30, if I'm right.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
4:30 začína teda samostatná výstava. Bude to aj do 30. novembra, takže ste všetci vítaní a veľmi rada vás samozrejme privíta najmä dnes a neskôr teda je diel.
www.eter.sk